I remember hearing about this movie literally like a year ago, even more than that. Back when the first trailer dropped. Oh, I don't know if it was the first trailer, but one of the trailers that dropped. And it looked pretty interesting. And then it kept getting pushed back and pushed back. And then eventually it got released on Netflix. And that's where I watched it. I watched it on Netflix. I think it came out a few days ago, I'm pretty sure. And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with it. The Woman in the Window is a movie about basically this woman, right, who is confined in her house, but not because of external reasons, because of internal reasons, right? Like she chooses to be confined to her house because she's agoraphobic, I think, which means like she's afraid of the outside. And as the movie progresses, you learn why she has that condition. You also learn like the people that are around her. You see stuff about her family. It sounds like recently separated in the movie. It sounds like she's recently separated, and she's still dealing with that. There's a lot of like, you're kind of thrown into a situation where there's a lot of moving parts that you're not really aware of, and that's the point, right? You're thrown into the movie and you're not really supposed to know anything. You're just supposed to be confused, and that's kind of the point of the movie, right? It's like a mystery thriller, kind of. I guess that's the best genre that I could equate to it. There's definitely a lot of like questions that need answered. Definitely a lot of tense moments. I just gotta say something about this movie too. This movie could not happen if this woman's neighbors had blinds. It would not happen, because the entire premise of the movie is that she witnesses something while she's watching them from her window. If they had blinds, that obviously wouldn't be possible. But I also forgot to mention, basically she has this thing where like she tends to observe her neighbors or the people around her, or just the street and stuff. She tends to be very observant of things that are outside, because she doesn't go outside. She just looks at the outside from her windows. And eventually she witnesses something. After, obviously there's a bunch of stuff that happens. I just don't want to spoil it. I don't want to get into it. But there's a bunch of stuff that happens. She ends up witnessing something through her window, and then that's kind of how the whole like movie starts. Even though that happens, I'd say maybe half an hour into the movie. The movie's like an hour and 40 minutes. It's not like it happens right away, but that's where like the movie really starts ramping up. And also there's a nice use of like old school movies throughout I'd say the first half, where it kind of tells us like what she's thinking, like what her mental state is. And I thought that was a nice touch. They don't really do it later on. They just do it like towards the beginning. And I thought it was a nice touch. It also feels like you can't really trust the protagonist. You can't trust Amy Adams' character, because she's prescribed a bunch of meds, and obviously these meds kind of fuck her up, and they make her have symptoms like, they give her symptoms like hallucinations, and like she seems to be euphoric in some sense. Like sometimes there seems to be moments where you couldn't really trust what you're seeing on screen, because you're seeing what she's seeing, but she might be tripping. So that's kind of interesting. And obviously like the movie like obviously plays off of that and takes advantage of that situation to kind of confuse the viewer even more, and it makes for a pretty compelling story. And it's also helped by the fact that Amy Adams does a pretty good job, I think, as her character. I think she's the main actress in the movie. She's the one that you're going to see the most of, and not only because obviously she's the protagonist, also because you're kind of like you're very, very like strictly following her. It's not a story where you're going to see other characters like at other times. You're really just following her and what she's discovering about these characters. So for her to have done such a good job when we're spending so much time with her, obviously it made the viewing experience a lot better. And honestly, overall, I think it was a very enjoyable experience. For this movie, I think I would give a B. I think I would give a B. It's not the best thing I ever seen. It's not the best mystery thriller you're ever gonna see. Certainly not the worst. And honestly, for what it is, if you go in with no expectations, I think you'll have a good time. To me, it was an enjoyable experience. I recommend it if you haven't heard of it, or if you haven't cared up until now. It's worth a shot if you have nothing else to watch.